Undertale. Best game of all time. 11 out of 10 Steam review. The peak of all gaming ever. How true are these claims? The subject of much debate, and a debate I'm wholly uninterested in. Because what matters is that I like Undertale and I would recommend it. And my opinion is the paramount of all opinions ever. Just look at all the games I've reviewed before, and how many games I've played in just the last year alone. All of the highest caliber. Putting that aside, Undertale is a very good game, and one that I like to talk about to anybody who will lend an ear. I know most of the people watching this are probably already aware of what both Undertale and Deltarune are, but for those who aren't, Undertale is an RPG that came out in 2015, where you play as a child who has fallen into a land filled with monsters, and they need to find their way back to the surface. It has a very interesting story and world, and the gameplay is unique, a combination of turn-based RPG mechanics with mini bullet hells. It also implemented a sparing mechanic, which may not be the first time in gaming that one doesn't have to kill to beat the game, but still was unique enough a concept for an RPG in that style to help the game stand out. Despite being able to be beaten in probably 5 to 10 hours, the themes are fairly impactful, and anybody who likes video games should give it a try. Undertale is a love letter to video games, so people who are familiar with them will get more out of it. Now, keeping all that in mind, how beloved Undertale is and everything that it's done right, I think I like Deltarune more. Deltarune is the second game created by Toby Radiation Fox. While it's not yet finished, the first 2 chapters are out. It's already at least as long, if not longer, than a typical Undertale playthrough. I'd give it like 3 to 6 hours personally, depending on how much you take your time, gearing a little more towards the 6 hours. And does everything Undertale does right even better. The art, the characters, the music, all are so spot on, and so far it seems to promise to tell a deeper story than its predecessor. The battle system is even more polished and has been expanded upon. By every metric so far, Deltarune is an improvement on Undertale. And just to sweeten the deal of it even more, the first 2 chapters, which, I remind you at the time of making this, is all there is to the game, are free to play. That's right, if you want to play this game I think will turn out to be better than Undertale if it isn't already, you don't have to pay a dime. You just need a computer, Switch, or a PS4. Except don't do that! Don't you dare play Deltarune before you play Undertale! If you have played Undertale, you should give Deltarune a try. But you shouldn't play Deltarune without first playing Undertale. Or, hey, I'm not in charge of you. But before you hit download and have a jolly time, allow me to explain why I think you really need to play Undertale first. Hold on, why would you play Deltarune first? Some of you may be wondering, why would you play Deltarune before Undertale? Of course you need to play Undertale first. How have you not already played Undertale? Slow down, and let's set up this straw man to brutally attack throughout this video. Deltarune is free. Undertale on Steam is a measly $10, and this year during the summer spring sale, it got down to like, $3? But 0 is still infinitely less than 10 or 3. True, Deltarune is not yet a complete game, but it is still hours of gameplay. It's an absolute steal for a fun time. Deltarune is not technically a sequel to Undertale. Toby Fox has made it clear that Deltarune is not a sequel to Undertale. Just because the 2 games are made by the same creator, even if the games are similar, even if the games have characters with the same names, does not mean that they are directly related to one another. The Tales of games, for instance, may all take place within the same overarching series and may have many of the same mechanics or names or monsters, but you don't need to play one to understand another, sequels obviously not included. Which, in the broad sense, is true for Undertale and Deltarune. Strictly speaking, you can play Deltarune without having played Undertale and have a perfectly serviceable gaming experience. However, that leads to a well-meaning person who has played both Undertale and Deltarune is asked by their friend who hasn't if, in their opinion, it would be alright for them to play the very free Deltarune first. And the supposed expert in this situation says yes, that should be okay, and then is surprised when the well-meaning gamer does not get hit with the same understanding of the game, or does actions that honestly never occurred to her in her own playthrough. Open letter to my friend Jacob. First, I am sorry. That was my bad. I did say that you would miss some inside joke stuff. But then you really surprised me by your actions in the game. On the bright side, it influenced the creation of this video. Yay! I also told you there was no wrong way to play Undertale or Deltarune. And despite this video, I stand by that. But I do think there's, more intended ways for a better experience and understanding of the themes present, and being more aware of what you're getting into when you're doing certain actions. If you're not interested in any of that, go to town however you want to play it, or in whatever order, that's fine. If you want a deeper understanding, however, heed my words. Admittedly, my read of the media that is Deltarune as well as Undertale is colored by, my experiences, as well as the fact that after being a teen exposed to Undertale, obviously I played it long before Deltarune was even a thing, so I played it first. And then I dove into the fandom and the theories and such. Still, I hold that there are solid reasons to play Undertale first. And now, let's get on to those. Also, obvious spoiler warning. Honestly, despite the premise of this video, I imagine most people watching this have already played either, if not both, Undertale and Deltarune. But I'll still be trying to avoid major spoilers for both games. For Deltarune, I'll talk about mainly mundane aspects of the first chapter, and in Undertale, vague parts for a basic playthrough. However, both of these games are best experienced blind. This is your final warning to just straight up leave this video and play these games. Low cost way to change your life. Anyway, point the first. Toby Fox literally says to play Undertale first. When Chapter 1 of Deltarune came out, Toby Fox released an FAQ to go with it, where he said Deltarune, in reference to its relationship with Undertale, is just a game you can play after you completed Undertale if you want to. When you start a game of Deltarune, Deltarune tells you it was made for people who played Undertale, and asks if you want to continue without having played Undertale. So, yeah. But who actually listens to that kind of advice? So, point 2. Teaching you how to play the game. Undertale's tagline is, the game where you don't have to kill anyone. As I mentioned earlier, the entire sparing mechanic is a large part of Undertale's appeal and gameplay. During a fight, the player has the option to either attack the monster or to act. Acting turns the interaction into something like a puzzle to find out which action will get the monster to calm down and become sparable. Sparing an enemy will not net the player any EXP, but it will still get them some gold for their trouble. This becomes the crux of the player's decisions throughout Undertale. To fight or to act, to kill or to spare. Killing the enemies in an RPG is the expected way to proceed, but Toriel tells the player that sparing monsters is the way to go. The game is very explicit about the two ways that it can be approached. Depending on how you interact with the world, there are going to be changes then to how the game interacts with you. None of them are terribly big overall most of the time, but there are still points where your actions are brought up, and it does change who is available to be interacted with. In Undertale, one of the biggest draws is probably the characters and their brilliant writing, and if you're fighting enemies, you are closing off interactions. Your fighting has a consequence on the world, and it should be taken seriously. Deltarune's first chapter also somewhat hammers that into the player in that one of your companions, Ralsei, would suggest you do is act instead of fight, although he does still give you a thorough lesson on how to fight, just to make sure you're fully aware. It's also pretty clear that in Deltarune, sparing and fighting do have a little bit of a different relationship with the player than in Undertale. That being said though, it doesn't fully prepare the player for how to think about interactions, as well as think about the impact of their actions on what happens in the game. After all, Deltarune also tells you that your actions don't matter, so why should spiting or faring at the end of the day matter at all? Undertale has 3 main routes that you can play it as: the neutral, pacifist, and no mercy routes. It is expected that on a first playthrough, someone who does not know anything about Undertale, rarer since its surge in popularity upon release, but not impossible, will do a neutral route, where they spare some enemies but also kill some others. And at the end, they're given a look at how their actions had consequences on the underground that they've left behind, and urged to try again, this time seeing if they can spare everyone. Deltarune never makes this challenge of you. It never really stops and make you consider your actions, nor will it ask you to go back to the beginning and give it another go. Maybe that's because the game isn't finished yet, but I don't think so. Thus, your Undertale playthrough gets the player ready for the kind of importance and weight their actions are going to have in Deltarune. Undertale also gives the player a rule at the very beginning of the game. In this world, it is kill or be killed. It is then, essentially, put to the player whether they believe this rule or not. Is this world really kill or be killed, like they were told? Or will Toriel's request that you spare your enemies win out? Likewise, in Deltarune Chapter 1, you are told several times that your choices don't matter. On one hand, this can be seen as Toby Fox telling you, the player, that this will not work the same way as Undertale, known for its multiple endings and freedom of choice. But it also feels to me like it's challenging you to try and prove you do have a choice in things. Or, if your choices don't matter, then do other characters' choices matter? Can you make that work in your favor? Undertale has you practice seeing a rule and defying it. Deltarune gives you a harder rule. But after Undertale, you're ready to find a way to prove it false. Admittedly, you'd probably do that anyway, but I think it has special layers to it after you've played Undertale. 3. Motifs and references. Toby Fox, as a composer in Deltarune and Undertale, is well known for his use of leitmotifs in his music. Small musical bits that show up in different songs and he uses to connect to different characters or feelings. It should be no surprise that motifs, both musical and visual, connect the two games. The clearest example I can think of for this is golden flowers. In Undertale, golden flowers are a very specific kind of flower. They show up at the very beginning of the game when the main character falls into the underground and their fall is softened by the flowers. The first character that you meet is also Flowey the Flower, who is a living golden flower. Golden flowers continue to appear throughout Undertale and gain a certain meaning as well as becoming a reference to other things. To avoid spoilers, I'm not going to say exactly what. So when a golden flower appears in Deltarune, it makes one wonder the significance of it. And of course, there are also musical motifs that carry over. This connects Deltarune to Undertale, with the leitmotifs helping to build parallels between the two. Now, some of the similar things that can be found between Undertale and Deltarune could just be references and not necessarily motifs. However, those times that it is a reference, a wink and a nod to the player, someone who has not played Undertale is still missing out. In Grillby's Diner in Undertale, there is a jukebox that does not work. In Deltarune, there is also a jukebox that does not work. It is commented on that it seems like you will never find a working jukebox. For someone unfamiliar with Undertale, however, this comment would seem perhaps a little odd and forgettable. Even for those who have played Undertale, it may not stand out terribly. For those who have played Undertale and catch it though, it's a nice little reference. It also goes a step further into the theorizing territory, with the question of whether, seeing as your character is referencing Undertale, is there a more diegetic nature to these references than just the creator drawing a connection? Part 4. Sequels and fanfics. A sequel has a notable leg up on telling a story that the first in a series does not have. It can skip or speed run through introductions of characters. It can build on previous themes, it can improve on what came before it. Or it can make it worse, but let's ignore that for now. Deltarune is very explicitly not a sequel of Undertale. It is a different universe. It is stated by Toby to be a parallel world. The characters, despite appearances, are different characters. Some things about them are different. Undyne still has both her eyes. Alphys has different opinions. Asgore in particular has a very different role in Deltarune than he did in Undertale. But they're also still somewhat similar. Toriel is still the mother figure to the main character, Undyne is still an authority figure, Alphys is still a big nerd. There is little reason to introduce characters that somebody already knows. In fact, it reminds me strongly of fanfiction. Not saying that Deltarune is just Undertale fanfiction, but maybe Deltarune is a little bit Undertale fanfiction. It can be seen as Toby Fox doing what someone who writes fanfiction can do. Rewrite and analyze characters that already exist. Put those guys in situations! Rotate them, see different angles of the characters, play around. With the base understanding of the characters already established, more can be dug into about the characters, and differences from the set understanding stand out sharper. More than the characters, themes or topics touched on in a previous iteration can be further explored in another work. For one thing, Toby Fox as a creator has learned from Undertale, and for another, Undertale was a short experience, while Deltarune is geared up to be a much longer one, allowing for much more time to be spent on a theme or subject, to look at it and consider what it means for the narrative, how the characters are affected, and come to different conclusions. Yes, certainly Undertale uplifts the experience of playing Deltarune. However, it doesn't totally set you up for Deltarune. There's a big secret in Undertale that seems to be a large part of Deltarune. The hints to the secret are not seen in your typical playthrough of Undertale. What is a poor gamer to do? Part 5, actually be a part of the fandom. Or that's what I was gonna say here. A bit of a kinda haha joke more than anything, but kinda changed my mind. Fandom is honestly a complicated thing. More than anything, I blissfully forgot when I first started writing this script how terrible it was years ago, to the point where a lot of people stayed away from Undertale because they didn't want to be anywhere near the fandom. So let's say this. I think poking around in old fandom stuff can be fun, and for people who play Undertale or Deltarune, it can add further context. So on the off chance you're someone new to the games, but found this video anyway, I'm gonna put some recs at the end just for the fun of it, of a few different fan things that I feel like bring up Undertale a bit. Anyway, this is all to say, I like Undertale, I love Deltarune. To get the best of Deltarune, play Undertale. Undertale was a sensation in 2015 because it was a good game with great characters. And the through line from Undertale to Deltarune is clear. Whatever you do, don't listen to your well-meaning friend who told you to play Deltarune first. Don't do it, Jacob! Anyway, if you want to supplement your Undertale experience, here's my I finished Undertale, now what? Starter pack for that time between Undertale and Deltarune. How the song Undertale Hits Home by GameScore Fanfare is a short video that introduced me to the musical leitmotifs in Undertale, and was the first time I started to critically think about what they meant and added to the story. Why Undertale is Still a Masterpiece by Nazumi VA is a more recent good video that talks about the experience of playing Undertale for the first time when it just came out, and going through the different routes and the wonderful sense of exploration that it was. It's a bit long, but it's also really good. Undertale Anniversary Animated is a short animation of Undyne and Alphys meeting, fleshed out from the brief description that is given in-game, and it's really good and cute. Here's also a link to, just in general, a playlist with videos that I really like that have to do with Undertale if you want something more. Comic-wise, I'd recommend reading Darker Yet Darker and Second Son of Gaster. It gives a possible backstory to the Skeleton Brothers with beautiful cross-hatching art and sparing use of color that really makes the moments that it's used pop out. Dogs of Future Past is also a really good Undertale comic. It's post-Undertale and written by Lynx Griffin that expands on the quote-unquote last mystery of Undertale of Gaster, featuring dogs, time travel, dead ghost children, the whole shebang. And now, the Undertale fanfic speed round! Jangly Old Couch by Rita Rose is an Undyne-centric fic about her, a bunch of neutral endings, and deja vu. There's her. There's an old couch with terrible springs and change inside, and usually, there's Papyrus. Second Contact by Anonymous is post-Undertale pacifist ending by only, a day at most. It's from the point of view of someone working a small store who gets an odd customer. Receding into Indefinite Rain by Feral Phoenix is also post-Undertale pacifist ending by 5 years, where Asgore and Toriel realize that they're, spoiler, aging again, and brave the underground to find the reason why. A great look at the relationship between the two, both what it once was, what it has become, and what it may turn into. What Little Monsters Are Made Of by Manga Lover stretches many years post-pacifist route over Frisk and Flowey's relationship, and what it means to have and be loved. I have a lot more recommendations than this, but I'm just trying to keep it short and sweet here. Anyway, with all of that, I hope you enjoy Undertale. If you're new to Undertale for the first time, drop a comment below and let me know. If you're old to Undertale, drop a comment about how you first experienced it.